I'm Scott Truitt from Salesforce Heroku. This is our second year in a row of sponsoring QCon in London. We had such a great time last year. We doubled down on our investment because we wanted to get an extra talk. And this year we did something different. We brought along two of our favorite customers from London. So yesterday, if you were fortunate, you saw Jonathan Lister Parsons from PensionBee talk about his story of growing the company, scaling out. And today we have David Santoro from Karwa to tell a similar story. I'm really excited to hear this, and I'll get out of your way so you can.
Hello. Hope you're caffeinated. I made a mistake not to drink a coffee, so to wake up somehow. Cool. I'm David Santoro. I'm the CTO of Karwa. Karwa is a car buying website focused on new car mainly. We provide content and car reviews and one sec, let me turn it on. Car reviews, mainly a marketplace for new car buyers to find the perfect car. Just to give you a few stats about Karwa, we have over 2 million car buyers visiting our website every month, website or app now. We sell about a car every 7 minutes. Quite interesting. A few years ago, we also launched a YouTube channel focused on car reviews again. And we're now the biggest YouTube channel in the world, over 52 million views a month. Yeah. And we're now 250 employees across 3 countries. We got Spain, UK, and Germany. But obviously, it wasn't always the same. It wasn't always this big. Karwa started with me and the 2 other founders in 2011. I was the tech founder at the time, the only person coding. It was a very different experience from now. You can see this is James, the CEO. It was some coffee shop in London. I forgot the name. I used to go there all the time. The internet was good. So you imagine being from there to 250 people. There's a big change, many changes. I'll tell you about 2015 especially. In middle 2015, we were about, whoa, there we go. We were about 50 people or so a few more people than the beginning. We had about 10 engineers, a big change from being the only developer. Still, things felt small. Just only 2 years before, we closed the first round of investment. 4 years since I wrote my first line of code for Karwa. Very different again after just a couple of years. One day, James, the CEO, we were in our Holborn office, small office, and come to me and ask, how long would it take to launch Karwa in Germany? I was like, I'm sure you're used to this type of question. Sometimes you ask, oh, how long does it take to do this? We weren't really planning international expansion that early, but at the time we were having conversation with a new VC, and they were very interested in expanding in Europe. So, okay, let's start thinking about that. What do we need to do? So, towards the end of 2015, the money arrived. We managed to close this round of investment, about £12 million. At the same time, also became a father. What else was happening? We were lucky to find the right person to run Karwa in Germany, so we hired this person as well. We're all ready to launch the website, as in to start working on the website. It was about at the end of December. On top of that, just to make things a bit more exciting, we were about to launch our first TV campaign. We were about to spend £6 million on TV, and we needed to launch in Germany, and we just have a bunch of developers. It's very exciting. scary at times. So, what was it? I remember when they told us who would be the voice for ads, it really gave me energy. It was like, I'm Sir Michael Gambon. I don't know if you guys know it, but probably more famous for being this guy in Harry Potter. So I thought, oh my God, we're going to get Dumbledore to be the voice of our ads. That gave us lots of energy. And that plus kind of 4 rules that I followed from the start really helped us to launch in Germany very quickly from then in 3 months. We didn't have anything. We didn't have an internationalized app. We didn't think it would be just a translation, obviously. It's not just translating a website. All our core data about cars came from a completely different provider, which we didn't know anything about. So we had to abstract APIs. We had to split some of our monoliths at the time to be able to achieve that. All of this in 3 months. At the same time, we also had the influx of users and purchases and the sheer amount of data that the customer producing, and we had to cope with that as well. So I followed these 4 rules and managed to stay sane most of the time. Cool. So without further ado, first of all, I'm a firm believer that founders should always put a warning in their presentations about survivorship bias. The rules that I followed and advice I'm going to give you obviously work for me, work for my company. I can't promise they're going to work exactly for you. Hopefully, they'll be a source of inspiration. Part of this rule came also from my previous experiences in larger organizations, enterprises. I kind of saw the things that didn't work well, and I tried to learn from that and apply that to my startup. So, rule number 1, which one is it? Let's talk about evolutionary architecture first, which is the topic we want to discuss. Why is it important to evolve this architecture? We talk about big differences from startup to, obviously, scale up now. Couldn't we make the architecture perfect on day 1? Spend a bit more time. I really think that there isn't a perfect architecture. There is only a perfect architecture at a specific point in time. I'm very happy of our current architecture, and it works really well for us. But it wouldn't have worked 3 years ago in 2015 or 2012. Reason is that we did have different funding, we had different needs. We didn't have the same security needs back then that we have now. But we also needed to move much faster and evolve the product much faster because we weren't clear what was needed. So for me, it's been very important from day 1 to rule number 1, to focus on the product. What does that mean? For product or your core differentiator, if it makes sense for you. There's one secret that TechCrunch, all these TechCrunch articles about overnight success don't tell you. It can take a long time before you get your first investment, before you bootstrap your startup. For the first couple of years of Karwa, we didn't have the money to pay ourselves salaries. I had to kind of code in the evening or maybe on the train back home from my day job to pay the bills. So I did not have the time to mess around with fancy new databases or infrastructure or on complicated deployment script. I had to concentrate on what later would make Karwa successful, the product. I had to make sure that people sign up, that maybe ideally end up buying a car, although that happened a bit later. Took a while to get to that point. And I was lucky in a sense because in 2011, you didn't have to worry about, like in previous years, you had to worry about setting up your own physical servers, or configuring your database, configuring your deployment script. I mean, one of the contracts I was doing at the time was working for an enterprise, automating a deployment process. It took months. So not having to worry about this stuff was essential. I was lucky at the time also, Heroku was around. Heroku allowed me to take my app on day one, ship it straight away, not worry about configuring a database, not worry about configuring a web server. I could concentrate on what mattered. And it's very easy to feel productive sometimes. We are working on some complicated technical problem, and it's fun. I'm a developer, I enjoy that stuff. But it's not really productive. It can really slow you down. And that's not just infrastructure. Even working on reinventing the wheels on basic stuff like authentication. Why should you implement your authentication system? Use a library. There's plenty of open source library, paid library, whatever. Caching, infrastructure. Just see what's out there, and if it is not core to your product, if it's not core to your differentiator, then don't bother coding about it. Our job is not about coding. Our job is providing solution to either consumer or business problems with technology. I mean, my favorite solutions are either the one that require no code at all, even better, when I can remove code. I managed to kind of create a culture now at Karwa where the developer really get pumped up and say, look, I found this new piece of software that allows us to remove this bunch of code. Fantastic. It's stuff that not only slows you down whilst you're writing it slows you down later to maintain this stuff, when you need to evolve and change it. It's stuff that you don't need. Anyway, rule number 2 that really helped me was to design for testability. Obviously, yes, you might do a good job of writing just what matters, but still, it will end up with quite a bit of code, services, and whatnot. And this code and services will change over time because you understand a bit more about your customer, because you understand a bit more about your business. They will change. And one thing I noticed is whenever I was using test-driven development to develop some of these core modules, it was much easier to change it. It wasn't just because I had test coverage that was stopping me from breaking expected behavior. It was the fact that TDD was nudging me towards more cohesive code with low coupling. And that is very important. The time we struggled during our refactoring evolutionary architecture were when we had too many dependencies in one place. So that generally helps. Now, you don't have to do TDD to create that code. You can still write valid code with high cohesion and low coupling. TDD reminds you of that. It just makes it easier to do that. Now, I talk about testing, but the next rule is a bit controversial because rule number 3 is about focus on the production monitoring instead of having an extensive test suite. Again, these rules may or may not apply to you. At Karwa, we have a culture of taking risks. We're okay with that. Obviously, especially early stage of the business, it was okay to have some errors in productions. So, broken page for a few minutes, it's okay. A job that fails and then retries, it's okay. As long as we can spot it in time, roll back maybe. I mentioned Heroku. Heroku provided lots of tools like immediate rollback of code. So for us, it was fine. And it's not just about spotting errors. We have a lot of analytics as well around business metrics we care about. For example, sign-ups, purchases, calls. For us, really important to track calls. And apart from the, tracking these stats, we still maintain a good amount of tests. We had thousands of unit tests anyway. But the one we probably reduce and we spend less time on were those big, expensive integration tests. They tend to get in your way, especially if you're changing the interface a lot or moving architecture quite a bit. But if you have monitoring in place that alerts you about this stuff, then you'll catch things in time. Over time, we introduced more mitigation techniques. I think there was Optimizely earlier speaking about feature flag. We've been using feature flag Karwa for a long time. We introduce kind of releases. If we push something, we push it only to a small percentage of traffic, maybe to our internal users first. So it's rare that we actually introduce errors, even with changing the code a lot. And if we do, we only affect a small percentage of our users, then we can roll back faster. It's a bit extreme for many companies. Your company might have different needs, so this needs to adjust that. But for us, works well. Nonetheless, good production monitoring is essential, and not just your servers, the actual functioning of your business machine. Now, remember the story I told you at the beginning. So, rule number 1, sorry. Forgot about the last rule. Rule number 4 is design for removal as well. We do a lot of tests at Karwa, lots of A/B tests, lots of changes. For every page we launch, for every feature we launch, there's probably 10 that we have to remove. If you find that if you're writing code that you start to change so many files, so many, maybe multiple systems, it's a smell. There's something not right there. Or if you really need to, really think, are you sure this feature is ready? Do we think it will make a difference? Is there another way to prove that these complicated changes is useful? So we often try to minimize, trying to encapsulate a change, ideally in a file. If you could have a file with everything, which is a bit contrary to what I said earlier, because you want to obviously split your code, but you can do it later, once you prove that something is useful. I have this rule at Karwa. I don't mind if the code is a bit rubbish, as long as it's contained. A specific module can be a bit messy, as long as it's one file. If it doesn't affect the other thing, it's okay. Then, when we prove that through test that is a successful thing, we want to keep it, we tend to then refactor, write more tests, maybe split out a bit more. There's something to be very aware of. Because when you evolve, you don't want stuff that's no longer used to slow you down. And you need to be very disciplined in this. If something is not used, eliminate. If it's test fail, eliminate the code. A lot of companies that do A/B tests end up with a mess of ifs everywhere and code. You need to be very careful with this one, because it will slow you down. So going back to our story, though. So I had this problem in 2016 where problem. It's nice. We started selling a lot more cars. TV advertising would bring a lot of traffic. The architecture, the web architecture was solid. We have lovely caching. We were able to scale with ease. In Heroku, at the time, we would just move a slide. We didn't have auto-scaling yet. Now we have auto-scaling. But at the time, it was simple as moving a slider. And all was fine. The one thing we didn't notice kind of happened a bit later. All these new users were producing so much more data that code that we wrote a few months before, simple codes, simple selects, were becoming super slow. Becoming so slow that all of a sudden those jobs were taking minutes instead of seconds. Then it started affecting also the web. We had serious downtimes. All of these was. My baby was 3 months old as well, so I was a bit sleep deprived. Another exciting time. Fortunately, we managed to fix this thing and spotted the cause of the problem. Obviously, I didn't know at the time that doing a count on a table the few months before was fine. It started becoming seconds and seconds and seconds, things like that. But I wish I had followed another rule, which I didn't follow at the beginning, which was rule number 5. Rule number 5 is to set performance constraint as early as you can. So be clear and strict about your queries, for example. So from day one, any app that starts now will have as tight as possible query timeout, because I think it's one of these things that you can really lose track of and becomes a problem later when your app is successful. You don't notice it at the beginning. Just to be clear, query timeout, what it does is stops query the overrun automatically for you. That obviously causes errors. It will cause an error to the user, trying to load the page, for example. But it stops the problem to propagate to all the other users, first of all, which is really important. But also, we put it at the forefront of your day, because now it's an error. It's not just, the page is a little bit slow. No, it's an error. You need to fix it. My advice is, for example, now we're trying to have every web query to be less than 10 milliseconds. It's not easy, and that's why you need to have this tight from day one, because you can work on it. The second constraint I use, I think is really important, is memory. I don't know what technology stack you use. I've been using different types in the past. At the moment, Karwa is mainly Ruby on Rails. And Ruby is a bit rubbish from memory management and can introspect what causing spikes of memory and things like that. So having constraints of the max memory and stick to it is really important, because as soon as you see maybe you're consuming more than you expect, you can start investigating. You start spotting what area of the code are causing the problem. We notice that often when architecture may be splitting a monolith, because you go from a query that was another base and maybe lazy loaded to change into an API call, and the API call maybe is not paginated, you spot this type of stuff, and you load a lot of data. If you are on another platform, they tend to be, oh no, maybe we need a bit more RAM, let's add a bit more RAM. And you start adding RAM, and your yearly bill increases quite dramatically. So I'm quite strict on that. We still run, it sounds weird, but on 512 megabyte instances on most of our apps, actually, because we were very strict about it. Rarely you need to increase the RAM. Obviously, sometimes there's good reason, fine. It's just you don't want it to happen by chance. Last but not least is your server time, basically the time the request takes to load. In particular, the 99th percentile of requests. Obviously, yes, it's useful to maintain a good performing app, make customer happy. But the reason why I suggest to put a constraint on that for the evolving architecture is because I noticed that it's really, really hard to have a consistently fast server-side code that is also complicated. And since we started kind of introducing tight constraint on that, the code that we have in our controllers, in our web apps, was much simpler. Because it really forced us to think about the shape of our data as well, or maybe our APIs, instead of adding just another API call here, another API call there, another presenter to kind of mangle stuff together. And code becomes very complicated unless you have these performance constraints, I think. I mean, you can also have good code review practices if you have that. So I failed at that. So constraint of performance tend to help in that. I couldn't find a better slide for evolutionary architecture. If you have a suggestion, maybe I'll change it later. But obviously, going back to our story, the traffic of 2016 is now just the norm. And many more things happened since then. We had to launch in another country, Spain, that thanks to the work we've done before, it took only 3 weeks. So it was like, oh, one success. Now, there's other challenges, and we are thinking about, well, what if we need to launch in 20 countries? What if we want other people to launch the website? Maybe we can change ourselves in a platform. That would be an interesting re-architecture of Karwa. I'm still proud, though, that all of these changes happen gradually. They happen over time. We didn't plan for all of this. We're reacting to an extent. But we didn't need to do a rewrite. We're now 9 years in this code base, and things are good. I think pretty confident we can stay with the same code base for another 10. Obviously, it's much more complicated now anyway, so I think we need to be particularly careful. We have more languages on. We have Clojure as well. There's Rails. We have a platform team focused on APIs. It can get tricky, and I think the challenge now is to teach the same principle to the rest of the team, to make sure that tech leads and principal really follow the same approach in their own area. It's always a big challenge. But change is unavoidable. That's the thing. So don't try to, you can't predict all of it. So plan only for the fact that it will change. And remember that your architecture will evolve, must evolve with your business. Just summarize. 5 rules are followed, well, 4 are followed and 1 are following a bit later on. Focus on the product, focus on what matters. Also, basically, don't reinvent the wheel. Design for testability. And really have a spot-on production monitoring of production monitoring analytics. That's it. Especially if your product is not mature yet, you're still evolving, make sure to design for removal. And set performance constraint early. And that applies to any project. Be strict about it. I hope you can use some of this advice. Obviously, we come from different type of companies, backgrounds. So let me know if this is useful. If you want to get in touch, I'm on Twitter. There's more people now at Karwa, cleverer than myself. So you can go and read the blog if you're interested about the stuff. And let me know if you have any questions. Yeah. Cheers.
So you talk about what worked, what didn't work.
What didn't work? As I said, that performance stuff, it took us a while to fix it. Partly inexperience as well. I didn't have that much experience with databases, especially. I mean, probably people here would have spotted the thing straight away. But having that performance constraint early on really would have made a difference. We'd have spotted the problem before it became catastrophic, basically. That's one big thing. Other stuff that didn't work. We weren't always as strict on removing code, leftover code. We're much better now. We are really embedded in our process. If you see our cards on our agile board, have a step after testing, which is, OK, now we need to create a card to remove the code. And the product managers understand that as well, so there's no fight about it. Really part embedded in the process. There's a lot of other stuff, obviously, failed. I'm related to architecture.
Thank you for the talk. What would you say was the biggest, well, it's hard to talk about biggest architectural change, I guess, when you talk about evolution of architectures, right?
We've done big stuff, I can tell you.
But yeah, I would like to know when you sort of shifted from low requirements to high requirements, what was the big things that you had to immediately implement that will set you on the path to evolution?
Yeah, I think especially when we launched in Germany, we had to identify what were the areas of our code base or the application where we think, OK, this is going to be exactly the same, and what's going to be different. So actually talking about mistakes, we expected the user experience for the German website to be different. where the backend staff, admins, and dealer tools to be similar. So we made a call to effectively the consumer apps to effectively fork them. Whilst the other one we kind of extracted out in the different apps and different services and shared them across both Germany and UK. Obviously, that took a while. From an architectural point of view, at the time, we introduced Kafka, which is also on Heroku, surprisingly. Heroku kind of evolved with us, so it's really nice to have that as well. So all our apps would communicate through event notifications. And interesting, we've done that in a progressive approach where we introduced the concept of event, but was implemented in a very simple way by poking directly web services. And then later we kind of substitute with Kafka. But we had a nice interface above, so the application didn't know about the actual implementation of that layer. So it was good. And then we had to merge back. Later on, we decided actually the consumer app is not that different and is very expensive to maintain two different code bases. And we didn't want to grow the team that much. So we ended up merging it back. So it's quite interesting. We split and then come back. And it's much better now. There's still things that are different, but we kind of within the same app. That was challenging.
You're talking about focusing on building the product.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have this experience where you build the backend more robust than the front end, because like the front end kept changing. And what are your thoughts on that? So you like try to build the best backend, like kind of like the backend that you think that's how the final product will be, or so you just like whatever the customer, like the front end should look like, that's how you build the backend at the first go.
I'm a firm believer that it's really hard to build a backend to do everything, you know, it's just hard. Also at the time, I was more traditional kind of backend and front end together. But I think we put almost as much effort as evolving the architecture of the backend to the front end. Because in a sense, it's quite complex. That's the stuff that changes a lot. We introduce, we're proud of having it, even for CSS and components, a clear style guide, which we didn't have it. Something we evolved the website towards. We're now changing, we're in the process of moving effectively how we do front end as well. We use Elm, the Karwa, for front end. So I think we put enough love for both sides. But I don't think it's possible to create, you know, just create the perfect backend, because it still needs to serve a purpose, I think.
Okay, just because I don't want to close this talk, we still have time. So, I have two questions. One is still technical. So, if you can elaborate more on the architecture, if I understand correctly, you run in Heroku from the beginning. It's kind of cloud-based, but it's not serverless. So you spoke about database servers. So that's one question, maybe the architecture. And the second, what's your team culture? What's your practices, day-to-day practices?
Ooh, the second one probably requires a whole presentation. Next time, no, I'll give you some tips. Describe the architecture in words. So we own Heroku. We have, just to give an idea, Germany, Spain, and UK are separate infrastructure in a sense. Fully automated, so they are aligned using Terraform, but still on Heroku. And there is a mix, each country has effectively a mix of Heroku apps. Some are just services, some are websites that kind of together form what Karwa is. So it could be the dealer tool, admin, many apps just for the consumer experience. And each one is mostly a typical Rails app with their own isolated database. That isolated database then get replicated into a more reporting database. We use Snowflake for that. And again, we have this Kafka, one per country, where interesting events get published. So users sign up, or a stock car got imported, and all the different apps react to that. So it's not unusual. It's not micro. I like to say we have right-sized services. Yeah. So we didn't go insane with that. Because also our team is not that big. As in 2015, we were 10 engineers, now we're about 35. So we still can do a lot. So I think when thinking about architecture, you also need to think about your team size, because it's one of the ingredients for your architecture. Culture-wise, I think we have one thing in common. There is this love for product. One thing that really drives me and other developers at Karwa is being able to ship something useful. We're obsessed with that. We do a lot of A/B tests. It's not just about something pretty, something cool, something interesting to code. Something that gets used, that we can see the numbers moving. Really get excited about that. And I think that really shaped the culture in a sense. At the same time, we are conscious of the importance of the craft as well of engineering, how that makes us go faster. So we always think of architecture, always think, how can we go faster? How can we not slow down? So we balance the two things, I think. But never technology for technology's sake. Sorry, it was controversial at tech conference. Cool. Perfect. So much.